Good morning and welcome to the Committee on Ways and Means. Committee Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Assembly members Anderson, Backus, Brown May, Dickman, Hafen, Hibbets, Howdigi, Koenig, Mosca, O'Neill, Torres Fawcett, Watts, Yeager, and Monroe Moreno.
And I am here. Will you please mark Assembly Member Hadigi and Speaker Yeager present when they arrive? I know that they are presenting a bill. I'll remind everyone to silence your electronic devices. We have public comment, and public comment will be at the end of our meeting today. If you'd like to call in for public comment, the number is 888-475-4499. Our meeting ID is 884-13669-763, and then press pound. We have a number of bills on our agenda today, but I will remind members that this is not the policy hearing on these bills. This is a fiscal hearing, so if we can keep our questions to the fiscal aspects of the bills, that will be most helpful. And if you notice, and hopefully you guys looked over the bills before you got here, most of them are on behalf of the Office of Finance in the Office of the Governor. So we will start with Assembly Bill 551, which is revises provisions relating to the indigent petitioners. 541. Did I? I'm sorry, 541. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Tiffany Greenmeyer. I'm Director for the Governor's Finance Office. And here with me is Peter Handy, the Executive Director for Indigent Defense, and he's here to present the bill.
Good morning. Peter Handy, Peterhandy. I'm the Executive Director of the Department of Indigent Defense Services. I'll be presenting Assembly Bill number 541. It makes fairly simple changes that this committee's already seen after our budget closed. It makes two changes. One in Chapter 34, subsection or Section 750, replacing the Office of the Public Defender with the Department of Indigent Defense Services, and makes a mirrored change in Chapter 7, Section 155. Essentially, this places the funds that were held in the Nevada State Public Defender's budget account into the department's budget account for making these payments to appointed counsel in post-conviction cases. I'm happy to answer any questions should you have any.
Thank you so much. So members, this is a budget implementation bill that was associated with Decision Unit E900 to transfer costs from the post-conviction legal representation costs to the Department of Indigent Defense, which is BA 1008 from the Public Defenders, BA 1449. The Money Committees did approve the transfer of these costs to the Department of Indigent Defense from the Public Defender's Office on April 14th as part of the agency's budget closings. Does anyone have questions for the presenters? All right, not seeing any. Thank you so much. Like I said, this will be quick. If we have anyone here that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 541, I invite you to the table. Not seeing anyone coming to the table now, and only seeing one person in Las Vegas, and he's not approaching the table. Broadcast, do we have anyone on the phone lines that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 541?
Thank you, Chair. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone who would like to provide testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 541? Not seeing anyone approach here in Carson City, no one at the table in Las Vegas. Do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 541?
Chair, there are no callers to provide testimony at this time.
Thank you. So we'll go to neutral. Is there anyone that would like to provide neutral testimony on Assembly Bill 541? Not seeing any here in Carson City or in Las Vegas. We'll go to the phone lines one last time.
Thank you, Chair. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we'll ask the presenters if they have any closing remarks. Are- Okay, see none. We will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 541. And we will move on to our next bill and open the hearing for Assembly Bill 542, which revises provisions relating to offenders. Good morning.
Good morning. Tiffany Greenmeyer, Director for the Governor's Finance Office. And for Assembly Bill 542, here with me is Russ Alfino, and he's the medical director, medical administrator for corrections. Go ahead and take it away.
Good morning, members. Russ Alfano, for the record, Department of Corrections Medical Administrator. Senate Bill 542, or Assembly Bill, 542, makes changes to Section 1 for the rhythm of examinations for female offenders in custody. It changes the pelvic exams and the mammographies to more appropriate community standards. That's simply it. I'm here to answer any questions.
Perfect. So members, just a little more information about the fiscal impact of this bill that was submitted. It's a budget implementation bill relating to Decision Unit E-270 in the prison medical budget account of BA 3706. The agency has indicated that there is sufficient funding with the base budget and that the additional funding recommended in Decision Unit E-270 relating to female offender medical examination is no longer needed. However, the bill is still needed to align statutory language in accordance with community standards of care as stated in the presentation and national guidelines, which associated costs are accounted for within the budget of the agency's base budget. The Department of Corrections budget accounts are scheduled to close in Public Safety, Natural Resource, and Transportation Subcommittee on May 1st. That dreaded date, May 1st. It's also Economic Forum Day. It should be noted that there is another bill, AB 25, that was sponsored by the Committee on Judiciary on behalf of the Department of Corrections to address the same issues that are in AB 542. And appears to be attempting to address the same issues. So with that, I'll ask, are there any questions from members? Vice Chair Bacchus.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I just had a question for you all regarding that AB 225. As we understand, there's an amendment to AB 25. And so our curiosity is we just didn't know, like, how is that going to align with AB 542? Because I know AB 542 goes to national standards, whereas the amendment to AB 25 is very explicit with certain, like, timelines.
Thank you for your question, Madam Chair. Direct, please.
Direct, please.
The language in AB 25 is just more illuminating or refining and more detailed of age requirements for these examinations and whatnot. The general effect is the same. It's just providing, and there are other pieces in the amendment that was proposed that go beyond just the impact of AB 542. For example, in the amendment from page 5, section 2 addresses other pieces and parts. Prison medical is fine with either one. The outcome is the same. It's just more explanatory and more definitive in the amendment as written.
Madam Chair, if I may have a follow-up. So this would be my only concern would be down the road, let's just say if the national standard is that women should have mammograms at 35 versus the age of 40. The amendment to AB 25 puts, I believe, age 40 and older, whereas this SB 5 542 just says the national standard. And so we're going to have conflicting laws if that was the case.
For the record, Russ Alfano, Medical Administrator. Correct, ma'am. AB 542 does effect the same change, which gets rid of the annual, making it mandatory for all females in custody to receive the annual exams. As I said before, the amendment is just more definitive, and it does mirror the community standards that are currently being mirrored in the correctional setting. We follow the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force and the American College of Gynecology. We follow their standards that they set, which is a nationwide standard, which currently has the 40-year criteria as outlined in the amendment.
One last follow-up, Chair. Thank you so much for the courtesy. So, I mean, do you need SB 541 if AB 25 is kind of addressing the standard that the department plans to adhere to?
For the record, Russ Alfano, Medical Administrator. Section 1 of the amendment and AB 542 are the same. The Section 2 and 3 relate to other matters that are not addressed in 542. If that helps.
So with that, you don't feel that there would be a conflict if both measures were to advance?
Russ Alfano for the record in response. No, ma'am. AB 542 as presented doesn't put the age restrictions or requirements that is offered in the amendment, but the amendment does have other legislative items that are not pertinent in 542. 542 is a piece, it's literally addressing Section 1 of the amendment as proposed.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I was just handed the amendment to AB 25. And so I see what you're talking about is the Section 1s kind of started off mirroring each other, except in Amendment number 21 to Assembly Bill 25, it provides specific ages surrounding the examination under subsection 2, and then their subsection 3 is deleted. And then when you look to AB 542, the language that's deleted in Assembly Bill number 25's amendment appears to be the language that is now in 542. So I guess I'm not sure how, because obviously I'm not on judiciary, how the amendment came about, but it seems like, are we using AB 452 as a vehicle to put this language in that was removed? I'm trying to make sure we're correlating this the same, because when I think about a national standard, if the national standard changes, and where I started with my first question was that if we decrease the age to do mammograms down, if the national standard, the task force says, you know what, we've learned that we need to start mammograms at 35 every 5 years, or whatever it may be. When you look at the explicit language in 25, it has the minimum age set at 40. Then you would definitely have a conflict in the statute if both of these languages were passed. So I'm trying to reconcile, it looks like AB 25 was worked on deleting this language, and I'm trying to find out why that was and where we got to where we're at with these two different bills.
Russell Alfano for the record. Thank you for the question. The deleted Section 3 is the mental health, medical and behavioral health. That's why it was included back into AB 542. I agree with your point, and I don't have a concrete answer.
Torres Fawcett?
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this piece of legislation. And I'm trying to compare now the amendment that I have in front of me that my colleague mentioned, amendment number 21 for AB 25, as well as this bill. And I guess my concern would be that with the language, as I see it right now, the amended language of AB 25 provides a little bit more guidelines to ensure that everyone would have access if they met those requirements, whereas this language would just say it has to be available, and that they should provide it if it's necessary. I do know when it comes to examinations, what is necessary, sometimes they don't say every year, it's not, I think it's different though than just saying that it has to be available. And then making this explicit language of who would then be able to have access to these services, I think is essential to this piece of legislation and to this topic, just to make sure that women that need these examinations would have access to them. And so my concern with the language that I see in front of me for this bill would be that it just says that they have to be there. It doesn't, and that they should be if they're necessary, but I think that that just gives a little bit too much freedom in this case.
Members, any other questions? All right, not seeing any. I thank you so much for the presentation, and we will spend a little bit more time looking at the two measures dealing with this subject matter. Thank you for the presentation. We'll invite anyone to the table that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 542. Not seeing anyone come to the table here in Carson City and no one at the table in Las Vegas. Broadcast, do we have anyone on the phone that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 542?
Chair, we have no callers for support testimony at this time.
Thank you. We'll move to opposition. If there's anyone here that would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 542, I invite you to the table. Not seeing anyone come to the table here in Carson City or in Las Vegas. Going back to the phone lines, do we have anyone on the phone that would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 542?
We have no callers for opposition testimony.
All right, wrapping this up with neutral, and not seeing anyone here at the table to testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 542 and no one in Las Vegas. Do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to provide neutral testimony on Assembly Bill 542?
There are no callers for neutral testimony.
Thank you so much. We'll ask the presenters if you have any closing remarks. All right, not seeing any, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 542. We'll move on to the next bill on our agenda and open the hearing for Assembly Bill 543, which revises provisions relating to certain fees for the use of state lands. Good morning.
Good morning. Tiffany Greenmeyer, Governor's Finance Office, Director for the Governor's Finance Office. And here with me to present AB 543 is Bob Mergel, the Deputy Director for Parks, and Charlie Donahue is Director for State Lands.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Bob Mergel, Administrator for Division of State Parks. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going over the meat of the bill as presented because the amendment that's being proposed pretty much eliminates all of that language, and so I'll kick it to my colleague Charlie Donahue to cover that part. Generally speaking, the bill as originally, conceived is Division of State Parks is allowed to lease lands for grazing. So we've been doing that, but what the issue is that the funds that we bring in for the grazing fees isn't very much in certain parks, and so the amount doesn't really allow those parks to do very much with that money. So we already have an established maintenance account. So the intent is just to be able to put that money into that account, which is a non-reversionary account. That way that money can build up a little bit so that we can actually do some meaningful resource projects in areas that we're doing grazing. So initially, the the concept was to put language in Chapter 407, which is the State Parks chapter, which would have accomplished that. When the language came back, it moved that language to NRS Chapter 322, which is the state lands chapters, because that's where the, I guess, probably first reference of grazing fees is located. So it made sense to some degree to like follow that back and see where the fees originate. Problem is, what came to light after that is that that particular statute, the methodology being used for establishing those fees is outdated. And so this kind of brought to light an issue that existed with that chapter. So the amendment, in essence, moves it back into Chapter 407 and mirrors language that already exists in Chapter 504, which is Department of Wildlife's statutes, because they also do grazing. So for consistency's sake, we just pretty much mirrored their language so that everything is kind of consistent when you look at grazing on state lands. So with that, I'll kick it to my colleague, Charlie.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Charlie Donahue, Administrator for the Division of State Lands. Bob did a great job giving you the overview. One of the problems the Division of State Lands has had is that some of the metrics associated with 322.075 are no longer available. And since 2011, the National Agricultural Statistics Service has been unable to provide to us the beef price index, which is part of the calculation, a rather complex calculation, which Lands goes through to just basically turn it over to Parks and to NDOW for their foundation of this is the minimum fee. And in 2018, we started going towards an average of other Western states that the service was able to provide those stats. It hasn't been perfect. So I think the amendment really addresses what is probably the most important thing in terms of the Division of State Parks needs, but also strikes a formula and calculation in 322.075 that is no longer sustainable. So the principle here is to actually afford the Division of State Parks to go out and solicit, and it also enables the administrator to reject any bids that aren't reasonable. And we're basically advocating for, you know, a free market here that, you know, folks who, the foundation that we've established is $13.37. Parks is receiving bids of in excess of $20, $24. So I think with this free market approach that, and the administrator's authority to reject something that's not reasonable is a very practical way to go and eliminate this from NDSL's statutes in 322. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions if I can.
No, thank you for that. And members, as far as fiscal impact for this committee, this is another budget implementation bill that's associated with Decision Unit E350. And upon the passage and approval, these funds would be deposited in the non-exec account for maintenance of state parks budget account BA 4605. The State Parks budget account is scheduled to close in the Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation Subcommittee on April 29th. So, members, any questions? Yes. Assemblymember Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this presentation. I think it's very helpful. And I appreciate some of the context that you provided as well in terms of kind of what that average is that you're looking at, as well as what some of the bids that are coming in. So overall, I think this makes sense. I do have just a quick, probably two-part question. So one is my understanding correct that by striking out this existing statutory language, there will now be nothing that prescribes kind of how we figure out that minimum baseline? And then the second piece of that is, what transparency is kind of provided? again, just thinking about our role as the legislative branch in providing oversight, sounds like everything's going great now, but obviously folks in this body will change, folks in your positions will change, and we just want to make sure that everything continues, that there's some sort of transparency or data points so that we can ensure that we're getting reasonable returns for allowing grazing on these lands.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Charlie Donahue, Administrator for the Division of State Lands. Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Watts. Yes, with this amendment, the foundation would be struck. I think in terms of your question or comments about transparency, the agencies that have used this foundation in the past, they go out and they solicit and they advertise, and it's a competitive process. So I think that gives me assurances that it would be above board, and that the agencies who have historically used this foundational value feel, it's my understanding, I can't speak for the Department of Wildlife, or I can't really speak for the Department of Parks, but it's my understanding through conversations that they feel very comfortable with this language. And, all of this is public information, so if anybody wanted to, they could ask for that information from the agencies.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. It is good to know as well that this is publicly available information. So, again, I think the main thing is my main concern is just making sure that in the future that there's a touch point for the public and for the legislature to ensure that everything continues to be above board.
Thank you. Assemblymember Anderson.
Thank you. And I think my colleague kind of started touching upon it, and in particular, because I agree that it makes sense to try to do most of this. My questions deal with the words from section 2.2.3, in the opinion of the division. What sort of matrix or items will be used for that opinion?
Thank you for the question. Bob Mergell, Administrator for Division of State Parks, for the record. So in essence, what's going to happen is that, again, as Administrator Donahue pointed out, all of our grazing leases go through an RFP process. So we go out to bid, we solicit, proposals, if you will. If any of those come in and they are not in line with grazing leases that we already have out there, then we would question that, and we would more likely than not reject any proposals that were out of line with that. Now, that being said, our grazing leases are in different locations throughout the state. So it's, we would have to look at some historic data and see what our last lease was, and if the new bids are completely out of line with that, then we would have to look closer at those. And if it's significantly less, we would reject it and try again.
Thank you. So, and I thank you so much for clarifying that a little bit further, because I think that kind of what I was looking at with this also is that's when it's going to a state agency, that's also another thing just to be aware of. But really appreciate that there's going to be historical data, making sure it's in line. So I guess that wasn't really a question, just to make sure to verify that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? All right, not seeing any. Thank you so much for the presentation. And we'll invite those to the table who would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 543. Not seeing anyone here at the table in Carson City and no one at the table in Las Vegas. We'll go to the phone lines broadcast. Do we have anyone on the phone that would like to provide testimony in support of AB 543?
Thank you, Chair. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. Then we will move to opposition. Is there anyone that would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 543? Not seeing anyone here at the table in Carson City or in Las Vegas. In broadcast, I am going to assume that we have no one on the phone to testify in opposition of 543.
Yes, Chair, that is correct. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. So we'll move to neutral. If there's anyone that would like to testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 543, not seeing anyone come to the table here in Carson City and no one at the table in Las Vegas. And by the way we're going today, I'm assuming there's no one's joined us on the phone line to testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 543. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair, that is correct.
Thank you so much. Well, ask the presenters if you have any closing remarks. All right, not seeing any, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 543. And thank you for being here with us. And we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 544, which revises provisions relating to certain license issued by the Division of Public and Behavioral Health for the Department of Health and Human Services. Members, this is also another budget implementation bill associated with a Decision Unit E225 and the Healthcare Facilities Regulation Budget Account BA 3216. Good morning.
Good morning, Tiffany Greenmeyer, Director for the Governor's Finance Office, and here to present on Assembly Bill 544 is Letitia Mutherall and Kyle Devine from Public and Behavioral Health.
Chairperson and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Letitia Mutherall. I'm a health program manager with the Bureau of Healthcare Quality and Compliance of the Division of Public and Behavioral Health of the Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you for this opportunity to present AB 544. This is an agency-requested bill intended to normalize the agency's licensing and renewal processes. Currently, all health facility licenses expire on December 31st of the year in which they were issued. This results in partial year licensing of most new applicants. It also results in processing an enormous bolus of renewal applications at the end of each year. This bill will allow health facility licenses to expire 1 year after the date of issue, thus allowing an entire year of licensure for initial applicants and eventually spreading renewal processing throughout each year. There's an important conceptual amendment that the agency has proposed along with AB 544. There was some confusion during the drafting of the bill that resulted in unintended language in Section 2. The Section 2 language would change the renewal dates for all currently licensed facilities starting on the anniversary date in calendar year 2026. Enforcement of the original language in Section 2 would create an unintended loss of revenue for the agency, as renewal of some currently licensed facilities would be postponed until anniversary dates in calendar year 2026. Based on a sample of current licensees, they would result in approximately half of current licensees paying their renewal in 2026 and the other half in state fiscal year 2027. This would result in a significant financial burden on the Bureau of Healthcare Quality and Compliance. This deferral of renewal payments was not intended. Rather, it is the agency's intent to collect renewal payments for all currently licensed facilities according to the current schedule and slowly reduce the end-of-year renewable list over time. As such, the conceptual amendment does two things. It removes Section 2 in its entirety, and it revises Section 3 to provide that the bill becomes effective on January 1st, 2026. The agency requests your vote to approve AB 544 once amended. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present this legislation, and I am available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. We do not have an amendment. Did you submit the amendment?
Yes, the conceptual amendment was sent to, I can't remember her name, and that legislate, the drafter.
LCB Legal drafted it for us as they drafted. Kyle Devine, for the record. So the legal drafted it for us as they're the ones who wrote the original language, and we work with them on that. So that should have been submitted, but we can follow up to make sure that it gets submitted through the proper channels if it hasn't been.
Okay, yeah, that would be great, because I show no record of an amendment. Generally, it would go to you, because you're the sponsors of this bill, and then you would submit it to our committee manager. So once you get that, that would be great, because I know that in the Human Services Subcommittee, it was recommended approval of this decision unit for the healthcare facilities regulation on April 4th of this year. So if there's an amendment before we go through and do anything with this bill, we would need to see that to bring it to a work program. Members, any questions? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you. I look forward to getting that amendment so we can share it with the committee. We'll invite anyone to the table that'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 544. Not seeing anyone approach the table here in Carson City, and no one at the table in Las Vegas. Broadcast, do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 544?
We have no callers on the line for support testimony.
Thank you so much. Then we will go to opposition. Is there anyone that would like to provide testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 544? Not seeing any here in Carson City, and no one in Las Vegas. Do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to provide testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 544?
There are still no callers for opposition testimony.
Thank you so much. And then we will go to the neutral position. Is there anyone that would like to provide neutral testimony on Assembly Bill 544? Not seeing anyone here in Carson City, and no one in Las Vegas. And I am going to make the assumption that we still have no one on the phone line that would like to testify at this time. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. That is correct.
Thank you so much. And with that, we'll ask the bill presenters if they have any closing remarks. Not seeing them move towards the table, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 544. And we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 545, which increases certain fees relating to emissions testing.
Good morning, Tiffany Greenmeyer, Director for the Governor's Finance Office, and here with me is Sean Seaver for DMV to present on AB 545.
Hello, Chair. Good morning, committee members. Sean Sever from the Nevada DMV. Thank you for letting us present AB 545 to you today, a bill that would increase the emissions fee we charge for forms certifying emission control compliance from $6 to $7, and for each set of 25 forms certifying emission control compliance from $150 to $175. The increases are needed to recover costs associated with the administration of the emissions control program. With increased costs in the program, the DMV can barely cover our expenses, and we're having trouble distributing revenue to the downstream agencies specified in NRS. And this fee has been the same since it was implemented in the 1980s. With the estimated revenue projections of the current fee, the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency will not receive any revenue, while the Department of Agriculture will experience a reduction of $1 million. If this fee increase is not approved, there will not be sufficient funds available to distribute to the agencies that are used to receiving it. We appreciate your time today, and I have friends in the audience to help me with questions. Thanks.
It's always good to bring a phone a friend with you. So members, any other information on this? This is another budget implementation bill. It's associated with Decision Unit E306 in the Motor Vehicle Pollution Control Budget Account of BA 4722. In that decision unit, the governor has recommended an increase of pollution control fee revenue of $1.7 million in each year of the 25-27 biennium for the administration of the admissions control program as stated by Mr. Seaver. It also noted that this budget account was closed in the Public Safety and Natural Resources and Transportation Subcommittee on April 23rd. And the decision unit E306 was approved at that time. Members, any questions? Not seeing any. You didn't need your phone a friend today. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'll ask you to step back, and we will invite to the table anyone that's here that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 545. Not seeing anyone come to the table here in Carson City, and no one at the table in Las Vegas. Broadcast. By chance, have we had anyone join us on the phone lines?
Thank you, Chair. There are still no callers at this time.
Thank you so much, and we'll move to opposition. Is there anyone that would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 545? No one here at the table in Carson City, no one at the table in Las Vegas, and no one on the phone line. We will move to neutral. Is there anyone that would like to testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 545? Not seeing anyone come to the table here in Carson City, and no one at the table in Las Vegas. And going with what we've had all morning, no one on the phone line to testify in the neutral position. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair, there are still no callers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll ask the presenters, and they have no closing comments. So with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 545. And we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 546. It's a measure which revises provisions relating to the fees for registration of certain vehicles. And welcome back to the table.
All right, hello again, Chair, committee members, Sean Sever from the Nevada DMV. Thank you for letting us present AB 546 to you today. It's a bill that would allow for registration tax exemptions for public charter schools. As funding for charter school transportation became available through AB 400 in the 2023 legislative session, public charter schools began purchasing vehicles and buses to transport students. However, although school districts are exempt from DMV registration taxes, public charter schools are not. This discrepancy results in public charter schools paying additional money to provide transportation for their students. Charter schools have complained about this difference to the DMV, so we told them we'd bring this bill forward for your consideration. And ironically, we do have a fiscal note on our own bill, so I said, get your laughs out right now. Because this would impact our revenue at about $14,000 a year. Public schools also get an exemption on the government services tax, and we have an amendment to address that if there's an appetite for that. This would, of course, increase our fiscal note. So we appreciate your time today, and we can answer any questions. Thanks.
We do have a few questions for you on this one, and I'm going to start with Vice Chair Backus.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I just had a question because this came up in another committee this session with respect to assets of charter schools. And so I guess my first question would be, and I'm not sure if you're going to know the answer, because we did use state money that was allocated to our charter schools for transportation needs. And as we've heard through our budget committees, those transportation needs were to acquire the vehicles. So I assume the vehicles are owned by the charter school, but is that like owned by these nonprofits, or is it still an asset of the state?
Sean Sever, DMV. I do have a friend in the audience that answer that question.
Thank you. If the phoner friend will join us at the table.
Melissa Mackinnon, Executive Director for the State Public Charter School Authority. The assets would be owned by the schools.
If Madam Chair, may I have a follow-up? Okay, and so I'm assuming when you're saying the assets are owned by the schools, those are owned by the nonprofits, or are those assets also being acquired and held by like the other entities that they typically contract with? I think you guys call them EMOs or something like that.
Melissa Macadon, for the record, they're not held by the EMOs. Not every charter school is a registered nonprofit, but they are owned by the schools, not the EMOs.
And then my follow-up, and I'm glad you're here because I'm not sure if the testimony that was given in support of a bill in another committee was accurate or not. So if a charter school, and hopefully they don't, but we've seen some charter schools that have to close their doors just because of issues that they have experienced, and we've provided those safe guardrails in our laws to do so. When that happens, what would happen to the assets, and then including like these vehicles that have been provided for with state public funds?
Melissa Macadon, for the record, great question. So just like any of their assets, they would be sold, and then the money would be used to pay, maybe outstanding debt that they had, et cetera. And then if not, it would revert. If there was extra money left, it would revert back to the state.
Assemblymember Muska.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank you for this bill. In my district, I always find that students and families don't know the difference between a public charter school and a regular school. They just choose the school next to where they live. And so my question was just how many buses have been purchased, and do you know why it wasn't included before?
Melissa Macadon, for the record, I certainly cannot attest to why it wasn't included before. I think it was honestly just an oversight. People didn't realize that the way the DMV portion of the bill read, I think it says school districts, and so that caused kind of a little hiccup when they started going to register these. I don't think it was intentional by any means. There have been a total of 46 vehicles purchased. Those aren't all buses. They include 9 passenger vans and things like that, but there have been a total of 46 vehicles purchased.
Thank you. Any other questions? Assemblymember Watts.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess first my question is just a clarifying question maybe to you, Ms. Macadon. So you mentioned that most but not all charters are 501c3s. Can you just illuminate on what the status of different schools are?
Melissa Macadon, for the record, let me be clear. They're all nonprofit. There's no such thing as a for-profit charter school in the state of Nevada. I actually have no idea how many of them have actually taken that extra step of registering as a 501c3. I certainly can get you that information, but I don't have it with me today.
Okay, that's helpful. And then I guess my question for Mr. Sever is, do these exemptions from registration fees and GST apply to any other nonprofit organizations currently?
Sean Sever, Nevada DMV. I'm going to phone another friend for that one.
Thank you.
Good morning, Bethany Musselman, DMV. No, we have registration exemptions in place for the Red Cross, but typically nonprofit organizations are still required to follow standard registration processes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Members, any other questions? Assemblymember Dickman.
Thank you, Chair. So you said this would not include the GST? You would have to have an amendment to include that?
Yeah, Sean Sever from the DMV. The way the bill was written, it just exempts the registration fees.
Registration fees.
If we did an amendment, we could include the GST.
Are you considering an amendment to do that?
Sean Sever, DMV. We did send it in this morning,
Okay.
but it's up to the committee if we'd like to adopt that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
And if that amendment were accepted, that would be a much larger negative impact to the budget, especially the highway fund. Is that correct?
Sean Sever, DMV. That is correct, Chair.
So I do have a question, and it's going along the lines of questions that were from Assemblymember Bacchus. I was not in the other hearing. If the charter school, which is a private entity or nonprofit, does unfortunately shut down, and if there were assets that were purchased with public money, would those assets then be turned back over to the state because they were purchased with public money? If you could come to the mic and say that. So that would include any buses or vans or anything else that were purchased with public money. Those are still public property that would be turned back over to the state.
Melissa McAdam, for the record, yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Members, any other questions? Yes. Assemblymember Koenig.
So we talked about the amendment to potentially exempt them from the GST. Is the school districts at this point paying that, or are they not?
Sean Sever from the DMV. They are not paying registration fees or GST.
So
currently.
this amendment would put the charter schools on par with the districts.
Sean Sever, DMV, that's correct.
Thank you.
And if this were to pass, would it include all vehicles or only the vehicles that were purchased with state funds? Because the district schools are all state funds.
Bethany Musselman for the record. This would include all vehicle registrations for charter schools, whether they were purchased with state funds or not.
Thank you so much. Assemblymember Torres Fawcett.
Thank you, Chair. And I think you hit this on for my colleague's question earlier, but can you explain just one more time? So if a charter school were to lose, if they were to shut down, what happens then to the bus? And if I remember correctly, it's that they can sell. But I just want to know all the different parts, all the different things that could happen to one of those vehicles.
All the assets would go back to the state.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted that to be clear because I think that's similar to what we do with like other grants. I know the federal grants that charter schools can receive, like the CSP grant. Once those funds are received, if that school were to close down, I know a couple years ago when Gals closed down, then those items then went to other schools. And so I don't know if there's anything in statute that does that, or how that, once it's reverted to the state, what that looks like how that property is dispersed. But there could be language that would be added to that transportation funding that we have too, that would just require that it then goes to another school, similar to how we have to reallocate the CSP, any items. So for example, student desks or laptops or whatever it is, it has to be given to another school.
Melissa McAdam, for the record. Was there a question in there?
I guess, is that
Sorry.
currently required, or no? It would just go to the state, but it wouldn't necessarily even stay in education.
Melissa McAdam, for the record. So there are detailed wind down statutes for how a charter school closes down and what happens to their assets, and I can certainly get those forwarded on to the committee. Yeah.
Thank you so much, members. The fiscal impact, if you look at the fiscal notes associated with the bill as it's presented today for the DMV, they estimate a revenue loss of just over $14,000 in both FY26 and FY27, and then in future bienniums as a result of the exemption of the registration fees being proposed. And it's also these registration fees would otherwise be collected and deposited into the highway fund. So this would be have a negative impact on our highway fund. And if I have not received the amendment, so once I see the amendment, we will see what the additional negative impact to revenue would be for, as the amendment is stated. But
Chair, if I may, Sean from the DMV, we do have that figure if you need it, but we can also do a revised fiscal note. It's up to you.
as long as you make sure we get it, and we would have it if and when this bill makes it to work session. Okay? Thank you so much for the presentation, and forgive us for the musical chairs this morning with the questions. And we'll ask you to go ahead and step back, and we'll invite to the table here in Carson City and in Las Vegas anyone that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 546.
For the record, my name is Robert Purdy with Silver State Government Relations on behalf of the Northern Nevada Charter Authority. We are in support of the bill, and we believe that any financial assistance for charter schools, which we all know are on pretty thin budgets, will be extremely advantageous to the learning outcomes of our kids in the schools. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Melissa Mackinnon, Executive Director of the State Public Charter School Authority, and we are obviously in support of this bill, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Seeing no one else here in Carson City to testify in support and no one at the table in Las Vegas, broadcast, do we have anyone on the phone lines that would like to provide testimony on Assembly Bill 546?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 546, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Assembly, Ways and Means. My name is Gil Lopez, GIL, LOPEZ with the Charter School Association of Nevada. Here in strong support for AB 546, aligning public charter schools with other public entities such as school districts and state agencies. On behalf of the Nevada public charter school community, I respectfully urge you to support AB 546. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next caller.
Sure, there are no additional callers for support testimony.
Thank you so much for that. Then we will close support and we'll move to opposition. Is there anyone here that would like to testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 546? Not seeing anyone at the table here in Carson City and no one at the table in Las Vegas. Broadcast, do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to provide testimony in opposition to AB 546?
We have no callers for opposition testimony.
Thank you so much. Then we will move on to the neutral. If there's anyone that would like to provide neutral testimony on AB 546, I invite you to the tables here in Carson City and Las Vegas. And seeing none, we'll go to the phone line. If there's anyone on the phone that would like to provide neutral testimony on Assembly Bill 546.
There are no callers for neutral testimony.
Thank you so much. And with that, we'll ask the presenters if you have any additional testimony. All right, not seeing any, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 546. And we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 548, which revises provisions relating to vessels. Good morning.
Good morning, Tiffany Greenmeyer, Director for the Governor's Finance Office. And here to present the bill, I have Alan Janae. He's the Director of the Wildlife.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Alan Janae, Director, Nevada Department of Wildlife, and here with me is Jordan Goshert, my Deputy Director, who I will be most likely leaning on for any number type questions. So I'm here to present 548. This bill, in summary, is looking to move fee authority for vessel registrations to the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners. As we look at this, we're also looking to change the percentage-based deposit to the State Education Fund with a fixed cap of $800,000 of an annual contribution from the vessel-related fees. And then additionally, we're looking to expand the use of our boating-related fees to support increased boating safety and public safety enforcement by our officers. If you would like, I can dive into the specifics section by section. It is a rather concise bill, but I'll stand for your preference.
We're not here for the policy per se, but more for the fiscal impact that it would have on the budget. And the ask in the bill looks like an annual deposit of just $800,000 because that's appears to be kind of the average amount that's deposited. My question for you, it also has in the bill where you could change what your fee structure is. So you might be bringing in more money, and currently there's a 50-50 split between your division and the state. So if your fees go up and we're stuck at $800,000, how do we get the other money that we should be getting?
Thank you for the question, Alan Janae. So what we looked at is we looked at our 10-year history, and we picked the average and set that fee or that amount. As far as the additional funds, we have been in many presentations within many committees reflecting to our need for more enforcement, especially for vessels and that enforcement that we do on those public waters, because that is the general public that we're dealing with. That's everybody from swimmers, rafters, those individuals that are on standing boards, other vessels that do not require registration, and we're doing that enforcement, and we're dealing with all of that plus rescues. And so we've been seeking additional funding to support that ask, and that is part of that contemplation is that any surplus that we might see in this with the additional fees would go towards that, as well as funding our public safety responses to situations where our game wardens are responding to public enforcement issues from other agencies, similar to the UNLV shooting, where a team of our game wardens were actually on site. And so that funding is not allowed through sportsman's revenue. It would actually be diversion, and it is not substantially funded at this time. So that's what we're looking at, Madam Chair.
All right, members, any other questions? I have one more. If there are adjustments made to your fees, can you just elaborate on what that mechanism is in informing the legislative body of the fees going up, so we know what the actual income coming in of the fees are if this were to pass?
Thank you for the question, Alan Janae. So as you can imagine, this will be passed by the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissions through NAC adoption, and so it will come back through the Legislative Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? All right, not seeing any. Thank you so much. We'll invite to the table anyone that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 548. Not seeing anyone come to the table here in Carson City, and no one at the table in Las Vegas. Broadcast, do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to provide testimony on Assembly Bill 548?
Chair, we have no callers for support testimony.
Thank you so much. Then we will move to opposition. If there anyone that would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 548. Not seeing anyone here in Carson City and no one in Las Vegas. I guess I want to be home. I keep saying that. Broadcast, do we have anyone on the phone line that would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 548?
We have no callers for opposition testimony.
Thank you. And we will move to the neutral position. And not seeing anyone coming to the table here in Carson City and in Las Vegas. And I am assuming we still have no one on the phone line that would like to provide testimony on Assembly Bill 548. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you so much. And we'll invite the presenters back to the table with any closing remarks, and they're saying no. So we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 548, and thank you all for joining us this morning. That brings us to the last bill on our agenda for today, and that is Senate Bill 458, and we will open that hearing. Senate Bill 458 makes a supplemental appropriation to the Office of the Secretary of State for an unanticipated shortfall related to travel, operating, and information services expenses, and invite the department to the table, and they're in Las Vegas. There's someone in Las Vegas. Good morning. You can go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Gabriel DeCara. I serve as the Chief Deputy Secretary of State under Secretary Francisco Aguilar. Thank you very much for your time this morning. I will do my best to be as expedient as possible, but I know that supplemental requests are not particularly commonplace, so I do want to provide the committee with some explanation of the bill. This request dates back to the last legislative session. For your awareness, if you weren't here or for some reason don't recall what happened over 2 years ago, previously the Secretary of State's office covered all of the credit card fees for customers that utilized our online business licensing service, Silver Flume. The state appropriated funds to the Secretary of State's office, which then paid the fees. This was a small perk for the customer, but created a burden for the state, including because it was incredibly difficult to budget how much these fees would be for. The Secretary of State's office regularly ran out of funding to cover those requests and had to come to this body to ask for additional funds to spend down our vacancy savings, et cetera, to make sure that that budget account was kept whole. When Secretary Aguilar came to office, that was one of the things that we looked at changing to bring the Secretary of State's office in line with other state agencies to have the customer pay for their own credit card fee. We sat down very early on in his administration with the commercial registered agents who are the highest volume users of our state business licensing system and who regularly had to use credit cards to do their business. We asked them if we were to no longer pay the fees, but were to ask the legislature if we could utilize these funds to improve the service of the Secretary of State's office, primarily focused on improvements to our IT infrastructure and performance, if that's something that they would be open to. There were a number of processes and procedures in place when Secretary Aguilar took office in 2023 that had not changed overly much since Dean Heller was Secretary of State many years before. And so the commercial registered agents said that they thought it would be amenable. When we came to the joint Finance and Ways and Means committees with our budget presentation, we made a request asking for just such that change, letting the committee know that we would no longer be paying for customers' fees. We immediately began working with the Treasurer's office to change that process. And asking if these funds could be appropriated for other uses. Now, that appropriation did not happen. There's a lot going on every legislative session. And when we saw that that appropriation did not happen and that there was still $6 million, $3 million for each fiscal year allocated to the Secretary of State's office to pay for fees that the Secretary of State's office would no longer be covering, we immediately started working with LCB and GFO, asking if it would be possible for us to bring a work program to the Interim Finance Committee to move those funds out of the credit card account where they would just be sitting dormant and put them in a place where they could be usable. We were under the impression that that was possible roughly a year later, after some back and forth and even the work program making its way onto the agenda for one IFC meeting before being taken off for technical reasons. Someone found a statutory reason why it was not possible. And in fact, those funds could not be used for anything else. Unfortunately, this was a year later. I will say Secretary Aguilar considers his responsibility to the taxpayer to be of the utmost importance. We did everything we could to utilize other savings to cover these expenses in other ways and to make the supplemental request as small as possible. Then that is the request that we've brought to you now. As limited a supplemental request as possible. I do want to add that those $6 million in credit card fees were reverted to the state general fund, $3 million last fiscal year and $3 million at the IFC meeting that took place during the session. And we've reverted, I believe, at least another $8 million in unspent one-time funds. So with that explanation of why this request is coming before you, I'll only add that many of the uses of these funds were to improve our services, Previously, when we took office, our notary division was 2 months behind. If you were applying to be a notary, it would be months before the Secretary of State's office could get back to you, could validate your documents, et cetera. We spent money to hire contractors to speed that process up. Our securities enforcement officers, our law enforcement officers, had no software to search bank accounts, to do the kind of complex investigation of securities crimes that is what they do day to day. There was a software tool that would save hundreds of work hours in pulling that bank account information, tracking transactions across multiple accounts, et cetera. Those are the kinds of things we are covered here. These were not incidental or nice to have expenses. We view these as necessary expenses to keep the Secretary of State's office moving. If we could have paid for these out of any other existing fund, we would have, but we had to change around where that money was coming from, and as such, we come to you today for this supplemental request. I am available to answer any questions that any members may have about this request or our programs. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for the explanation of why we are here today. There are some members who are new to this committee that were not a part of this committee during the last legislative cycle when this conversation started. I was privy to it. I remember things a little bit different than the way that you put them. So what I did is I asked our fiscal staff to kind of put together a timeline for those that are new to this committee to get a better understanding of how we got here today. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Ms. Kaufman and ask her just to go through the timeline of how we got here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Sarah Kaufman, Legislative Council Bureau, Fiscal Analysis Division. For the committee's reference and discussion with the Secretary of State's request, back in the 82nd legislative session, the Secretary of State on March 6, 2023, did mention in their testimony that they were seeking to charge credit card fees and go to a different model so that general fund appropriations could not be utilized. However, there was no budget amendment that was provided to the 82nd legislature to bring in that revenue, and as such, the $3.1 million each year for the 2023 and the 2025 biennium was included for the purposes of funding credit card discount fees. On July 17th, 2023, so just after the 82nd legislature adjourned, the Secretary of State did implement their new credit card fee, which is a 2.5% transaction fee. And then on March 11th, the Secretary of State submitted a work program to expend $1.7 million for in-state travel, operating expenditures, information systems, and training. It's my understanding that those expenditures were already incurred without the approval of the revenues that were to be funded with it. However, on April 5th, it was determined that the request violated Section 7 of the Authorizations Act, which requires funds that are to be used that could be reverted to the general fund to seek an exemption for use, that it needs to be approved by the Interim Finance Committee. So as such, April 5th, that particular work program was withdrawn. The Secretary of State did come back on August 15th and utilized savings from their personnel in order to cover some of the expenditures that they had already incurred without revenue to support it. And then in discussions with the Governor's Finance Office, Fiscal Analysis Division had determined or had heard that the direction
given to the Governor's Finance Office was that pursuant to Section 41 of Senate Bill 511, which was the Appropriations Act, that the general fund appropriated to the credit card fee processing cannot be used for any other purposes other than paying for the fees, the credit card fees to be processed. And so no further recommendations were submitted to the Governor's Finance Office as well as to the Interim Finance Committee to utilize these funds during the 2023 to 25 biennium. Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that timeline breakdown. Members, any questions? Assemblymember Hafen.
Thank you, Chair, and want to thank the Secretary of State's office for being here today. And I know it's a little bit slightly off topic, but I promise I'll make it back in here. We have received numerous emails and letters on this particular bill, voicing frustration, and I won't get into that, but because my concern is that we recently closed the budget, and I believe that we closed about little over $4 million less than what either the agency requested or Governor Rec, I can't remember which one. And so here we're doing an appropriation to give you additional money, but in the next biennium budget, we're going to be cutting over $4 million. And so the concern is obviously, are we going to see this again? And will we be back next session having to do the same thing, but potentially with a larger amount with the large budget cut?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Hafen. Gabriel DeCara for the record. And thank you as well, Chair, for the overview of the timeline. As soon as our office was informed that statutorily we could not work program those existing dollars to cover these expenditures, we immediately stopped any spending. Again, fiscal responsibility is incredibly important for the Secretary. We built everything into our ongoing budget, into our budget request to the Governor's office, and then almost all of which the Governor put in his recommended budget, which the Secretary was grateful for. And so we did not want to be in this situation again. I will say there were for example, notary, we believed that there is a strong need to have additional notary positions. That's why we brought on contractors. And for the next biennium, we requested notary staff. Now, that notary staff was not granted to our office. We understand the many fiscal concerns in front of this committee and the need to make sure that every agency across the state is whole. So that may have an impact on the service that the notary division is able to provide. That being said, if the Secretary of State's office was not allocated funding to pay for contractors, we will not hire contractors. We do not want to be in this situation again. Thank you. And actually, as a quick follow-up, a number of the important technology items, for example, that validate software that helps our law enforcement officers track transactions, that was built into our budget as well. All of the ongoing expenses that we found other sources to pay for in our regular budget. Thank you.
Thank you. You had a follow-up? Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Was there another question? Assembly Member Hibbets, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair, but actually Ms. Kaufman answered it for me. So thank you, Ms. Kaufman.
Thank you so much. We have amazing staff. Assembly Member Dickman? Disregard. Assembly Member O'Neill?
Thank you, Chair. I may have missed it, but out of the, do you have it itemized how that 700, I've got to put my glasses back on. The $773,148, if you're reimbursed, where you've mentioned the shortfalls related to travel, operating, and information services. Do you have it itemized out how much went to each, the overspend was in each one of those categories?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember O'Neill. We do indeed. I believe we've also provided all of that to LCB. I do have the brief breakdown in front of me. For travel, that is $14,505 in Category 3. Operating expenses, that's $352,109. Those were for the contractors who have been assisting the notary division for the last year. And then Category 26 is our IT category, information services, $406,534. And as Assemblymember Hafen referenced, and our office has received a number of phone calls and emails about this item as well. In case it matters to anyone, none of these expenditures have anything to do with elections. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Not seeing any other questions from members. I thank you for saying that this issue, we will not see this in the future in response to Assembly Member Hafen's questions, that it has been taken care of in the upcoming budget. As I said, I had remembered things a little bit differently than the way that you presented it in your presentation, but I appreciate the presentation. And this is nowhere that any of us want to be on this bill. But I believe it is something that we are going to have to take care of. I think you can sense the frustration of having to be in this position. I'll just say this as the chair of this committee, if it's not in writing, do not move forward. If it's not in writing from this body as legislative leaders and responsible leaders of the budget of the state, please do not move forward on any other decisions moving forward without making sure there's legislative approval before doing it. I'm glad that you've taken care of this situation so it doesn't move forward, but for any other future items. And not seeing any questions from any other members, I'll ask you to step back and we'll see if there's anyone that wants to testify in support of Senate Bill 458. Not seeing anyone here at the table in Carson City and no one at the table in Las Vegas. We will go to the phone lines. Broadcast, do we have anyone to testify in support of Senate Bill 458?
Chair, we have no callers to testify in support.
Thank you so much. We will move to opposition. Is there anyone that would like to testify in opposition of Senate Bill 458? Not seeing anyone here in Carson City and no one at the table in Las Vegas. Do we have anyone on the phone lines that would like to testify in opposition of Senate Bill 558?
Chair, we still have no callers for opposition testimony.
Thank you so much. Then we will move to the neutral position. If there's anyone that would like to provide neutral testimony on Senate Bill 458, not seeing anyone here in Carson City and no one at the table in Las Vegas. Last time to the phone lines for this bill. Do we have anyone that would like to testify in the neutral position of Senate Bill 458?
Chair, we still have no callers for neutral testimony.
Thank you so much. Then we'll ask the presenter, do you have any closing remarks? And he's shaking his head no. And with that, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 458. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. And it is still morning, thank goodness. Members, that takes us to the very last item on our agenda, which is public comment. If you'd like to provide public comment, we invite you to the table here in Carson City and the table in Las Vegas. And if you'd like to provide public comment by phone, our number is 888-475-4499. Our meeting ID is 884-1366-9763. And then please press pound. Not seeing anyone here at the table for public comment in Carson City and no one at the table in Las Vegas. We will go to our phone lines for public comment.
Sure, the public line is open and working, but we have no callers.
All righty then. Well, members, 2 fiscal meetings down and it's still morning. We are doing the Lord's work in the people's house. Yes. So I will see you all tomorrow morning, bright and early on Saturday for our next fiscal meeting. Enjoy the rest of your day. We are adjourned.